All right, we are live. So thank you everybody for joining this Hangout on Air today. I'm Lucille, I'm head of talent at Stride. We're an agile consultancy based in New York City. I am really excited to have a panel of very influential women in tech here with me today. We're going to do a career fireside chat. It'll be an open conversation. We're going to end with a 15-minute open question and answer session, so feel free to type your questions in from the YouTube comments on this live stream page. I think I'll start with introducing Debbie Madden, and then Debbie's going to give a quick intro of herself, and then we'll pass the mic to the other panelists to give a quick self-introduction. All right, Debbie, passing the mic to you.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. I am beyond thrilled and honored to be hosting this panel with some of the most amazing women that I know personally, and I've known a lot of these women for several years. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Debbie Madden, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Stride. So I have the pleasure of working with Lucille. I would like to just take a minute and have all of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some really exciting questions that I have, 5 or 6 questions that we'll go through today, and then hopefully everyone will have some time to reflect and think about your own situations, time where you've been in similar situations as the ones we're going to be talking about, and take some lessons and takeaways from our conversation. So I'll hand the mic over to Cindy, and then we'll go from there.
Hi everyone, my name is Cindy. I'm one of the founders of Experiment.com, which is a funding platform for scientists. You can think of us like a Kickstarter for science. I started the company when I was an undergrad at the University of Washington, and before starting this company I was a scientist, so I was funded by Howard Hughes Medical Institute to program immune cells, and I also worked with an undergrad team to design an anthrax therapeutic that the Army is now using. I don't do very much science anymore, but I do review a lot of proposals from scientists. Now mostly I just do website-y things. We have a team of 5 in San Francisco, but we're moving to New York at the end of the month, so we are looking to add 1 more person to our team, an engineer. I spend most of my time speaking with professors and graduate students, but I also code, and I travel a lot. Last year I went to 20 states, so this year I'm trying to finish the last 30.
Hi everyone, my name is Irina Kretschmer. I'm VP of Engineering at Exo Group, which is the company behind the #1 wedding website in the US, thenut.com. We also have a wonderful website for new and expectant parents, thebump.com, and we have thenest.com for couples creating their first home. So we basically have all the exciting life stages covered. I started my career as a software engineer, grew through the ranks to become a manager, a director, and now a VP. I've worked with different technology stacks at different industries, from e-commerce to educational technology to media, etc. At Exo, I manage several software engineering teams that work on various consumer-facing aspects of the Nut, the Bump, the Nest, as well as several of our mobile apps.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Van Gelder. I'm VP of Engineering at Stride, which is Debbie and Lucille's company. And before doing that, I've got about 15 years software development experience, so I've definitely been in the trenches with the consultants before taking this on. We are about 30 people, 35 people now, of which most are software developers. There's a few people, including me, who try to make sure that they're in the right place. But generally, we're a consultancy that's run by consultants for consultants.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Ober. I'm a senior developer at Paperless Post here in Manhattan, New York. This is probably the biggest team I've been on with so many women. Lately, or in other environments, I've had maybe 1 or 2, but I actually have almost dozen or so female coworkers here, which is amazing. In my free time, I also volunteer with RailsBridge in New York City. We hold workshops to teach women how to code in Ruby on Rails. And I also help lead Write Speak Code, and this year we have our conference in Chicago, and I hope to invite lots of women developers to it. And Lisa is also one of our meetup organizers in New York City, and they do a great job here. So I'm really happy to be involved with so many different talented women in my life. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonali Sridhar. I'm one of the co-founders of the Recurse Center, formerly known as Hacker School. You might have heard of that. We're a 3-month self-directed programming retreat here in New York City. People come from all over the world to attend the program, and people spend about 3 months writing open source software. So RC is designed to allow people to grow together as programmers in a mostly like friendly, intellectual, and energizing environment. Previous to this, I come from an interaction design background, and I've spent about 15 years being an interaction designer, and I came to programming through that very quickly. Life moved from print to web to actually programming. So that's how I'm here, and we've been running the program now for about 4.5 years. We're coming up on our 5th year this July, and I'm excited to hear what you all have to ask us.
Well, that was wonderful. The introductions were very informative for me, so thank you everyone for sharing a little bit of background. The first question I have is about how did we get started? You know, I've been in tech for 20 years, and there's always this conversation around what can we do, those of us that are in tech, to inspire more women to get into technology, whether we're having the conversation with them in elementary school, high school, college, or once they've started their careers. So I think one of the best ways to have that conversation is to share our experiences, because many of us have been in technology for quite some time. So if someone can, or a few of us can answer, how did you get in tech, and what inspired you to choose technology as a career?
I'll take that one if you don't mind. I was drawn both to the problem solving and to creative aspects of technology. I really enjoyed solving, coming up with interesting technical solutions to real life problems. And the idea of putting something in front of people, building a software that is going to make people's life easier one way or the other, really was very appealing to me. And there was one more reason, which is I wasn't super social, so I thought becoming a software engineer would allow me to sit quietly in a corner and just write code and not to talk to people too much. I really laugh about it now, because probably a good 70 to 80% of my time nowadays is spent actually talking to people, and I enjoy it. But full disclosure, that was one of the reasons that I went into software.
Lisa?
Yeah, so I'm an English major. I kind of fell into software development by accident. So it never occurred to me to study software engineering. My math is really bad, and I thought I would be terrible at it. So I have a master's in medieval English. I got into that. I was like, great, now what do I do with my life? So I thought software was really difficult, but this web design thing, that didn't actually look too hard. So I bought a book on HTML, a book on JavaScript. I started building websites for my parents' friends. I got my first job, and then I realized that actually the backend stuff was way more interesting to me. So I started out by doing some PHP. Then my next book was on Java, and I've been pretty much doing that ever since. My math is still terrible. It turns out that doesn't really matter. I've loved it. I've been doing it for 15 years now.
That's a great story, and I never knew that about you, so thank you for sharing. Cindy?
Similar to Lisa, I also got into tech accidentally. I come from a science background, and the reason why I learned how to code was because I wanted to solve my own problem. So as an undergrad, I we had just published this paper where we designed an anthrax therapeutic, and I knew that we could use this drug as an antibiotic for more generic hospital-acquired infections. And when I went to ask my professor where I could get $5,000 to do a study, he was like, the system doesn't fund people like you because you're 20 years old, you don't have a PhD, and like NSF just doesn't give out grants that are $5,000 to people like you. And so I took a Java class when I was an undergrad, and then when we need to build this website, me and my co-founder were just like, we just have to teach ourselves how to code if we want to solve our own problem. So that's how I got started. I think that a really big influence on me was also video games when I was young. So I've spent a lot of time playing Nintendo games, specifically Pokemon.
That's great. Rachel, do you want to add something?
Sure. So for me, I tell this story a lot, and I joke, well, I used to joke that my father groomed me from a young age to prepare me for software engineering, and then whenever I told him that I was calling it a joke, he's like, oh no, that's true. He used to bring me over to his computer if he was making any type of like hardware changes and say, hey, look at this, yeah, make sure this is grounded, and et cetera, et cetera. And by the time I got into high school, I was also solving a problem that I wanted, even though it wasn't as important as any type of like drugs or anything like solving health issues, but I had art that I wanted to display on the internet, and so I learned how to drag and drop things with a WYSIWYG, and then I was like, oh, I want more control over this, so then I learned HTML, I started dabbling with JavaScript, and then I too was really interested in databases to house all of this information about it, and soon I was just spending a lot more time programming rather than making art, and plus my mother said I would never make any money doing art, so they wanted me to go to college for computer science. I did a major with computer science and cognitive psychology, which kind of wrapped these two ideas together of programming but also having this human aspect with what I was working on, and I was really interested in how humans use computers or used websites, and I think that's really influenced a lot of the work that I do today, such as front-end engineering and talking to people to find out what exactly they need something to do rather than just kind of like forming ideas and just programming things.
That's actually a pretty great segue into the way I got to programming, because I came at it from art school. I kind of rebelled the stereotypical growing up in South India and going to engineering school, so I insisted on going to art school, and then when I got to it, the most interesting aspect about it is you learn by making in art school, so it's all project-oriented work, and you see what you've done quickly, like the results are really quick. And so when I got to the web world, or design per se, I think the most frustrating part was not being able to actually be the person building or rendering the piece. So it's difficult to keep saying, oh, move it by half a pixel, or move it by 1 pixel, or make it half this thing thinner. And it was just, you had to learn it so that you could control what it felt like and what it looked like and what the experience felt like. So that kind of brought me to programming, and so much later in life. And I did my entire undergrad and my master's in art. And also within that, I did a lot of hardware work. So during my master's, I started building a lot of like wearable technology and playing with circuits and building and breaking circuits. So circuit design and getting into hardware felt much easier entry point before even software, because again, it was very tangible and you could see your results, and things were blinking, and that was exciting, so that's how I got to technology, and mostly now front end work. Yeah.
I love every single one of these stories. Was absolutely amazing, and thank you all for sharing. So another big topic that I've talked about for as long as I can remember is this idea of like subconscious bias, right? Women in tech have various opinions on, does it exist? Is it real? How do we react to it? Do we run head into it? Do we ignore it? And I've heard various things, like I said, over the last 2 decades. But I'm interested in hearing from some of you. Can you share a story of an obstacle or a difficult situation that you've personally experienced throughout the years, whether big or small? I think all stories, no matter how, whether it lasted 5 minutes or 5 years, is really valuable. So does anyone have a story they want to share about an obstacle or a bias that they faced?
I can start. So I have like two main ones. I think a very obvious obstacle that I encountered was at a job where I was hired by a director who was very awesome. He was awesome, and he was very protective of the engineering team, and very willing to work with them, and kind of keep us as engineers like safe from kind of like product people and kind of making sure we were getting what we needed. Unfortunately, he decided to move on to greener pastures at one point after I'd been there for about a year, and we had a new person come in to lead the engineering team, and I just started to see everything that I loved about my job change by this one person. And what happened is instead of all the engineers working in the bullpens, which is not a great term and it's not really a great place to work, but we were all on the same level. And we all felt like we were collaborating with one another. And then we moved to a different floor, and all of the people who were team leads and managers started working in an office. So they would have offices, and then everybody who was an engineer worked out on the floor. And then we started having, and all of these managers were male. We had a female manager at one point who left, but all of them were male, all of them were offices, and you had this very then physical boundary between who were the leaders and who was kind of like in the pen, the cattle even. That's like a horrible idea. But then started this culture where these managers would then go out to drink, and then it started to become very bro-y and very like male energy, like we're going to get drunk and we're going to talk, and that's where they had their management meetings. And it was just like, it was very kind of stereotypical men's club type of thing, and it just it sent the signal that you could not join this thing, like absolutely if you were not a woman, and it made it hard for, I think, everybody to kind of feel like they could voice their opinion. So I actually saw this transition between a very nice working environment into something that just was not very nice. And I kind of wanted to put this in here too, where it's like not everything is horrible. For a number of years, I taught at General Assembly teaching back-end Ruby on Rails development, and sometimes you get like interesting characters in the classes, and I've kind of seen how the I would say the kinds of people come in. It kind of started as people who they set themselves, they paid the money to go to these classes, and at one point I started seeing a lot more people who were being sent by their companies, so I feel like their mentality was different. So I had one student in my class who his perception of engineering was with other people he worked with, so he was in marketing, and the other engineers, like he was going off of maybe their behavior, and I would say he's not a bad person, but he started picking up like, let's bro down in code, and he actually was using this in class, and I could tell some of the other students in the class didn't like it, and I just politely told him, oh, that's actually looked down upon. And whereas I had seen the other students who were really willing to speak up, they started like telling him, yeah, that's kind of like a really uncool thing to say, like not just, it made me uncomfortable, but it's also uncomfortable for other women, even though there's no like women who are listening to you right now, and you might, if you actually are looking for a job, people would be turned off by that. And I think that really struck him, and at the end of the class he says, I learned a lot in software development, but the biggest thing was whenever you told me that it was actually going to hurt me speaking like a bro, and I think I learned a lot from that. So I think that was one of the really standout obstacles that I could kind of like attack at the beginning whenever you kind of see these behaviors start. And it was like a big moment for me as a teacher.
That's great. That's great. Anyone else want to jump in with an interesting story?
I can go. I think I've been really lucky, and I don't think being a woman has ever been an obstacle for me, but being young has been a big obstacle for me. So when I started this, I was 21, and when we were in Seattle, we went out and tried to raise money we spoke with almost every investor in Seattle, and everyone would say things like, "You're too young, you don't have a business degree, what makes you think you can do this?" That was really hard for me, but I think the most challenging thing for me was believing that I could do this myself. And so we moved to San Francisco a year after we started the company and joined a program called Y Combinator. And right after Y Combinator, we raised a round of $1.2 million in a course of 10 days. And everything just happened really, really fast. And looking back on it, right after we closed that round, I felt a lot of pressure to grow our team, grow our business, and I really didn't know what I was doing. Both me and my co-founder felt like we were imposters, like we weren't supposed to be here, we didn't really deserve the money. And 2 years after that, I actually took a break from Experiment and traveled a little bit to Southeast Asia. And during that time, I realized that all of that pressure was not necessarily pressure that the investors have put on me, but pressure that I had put on myself. And when I came back, I really changed the way that I ran the business and the way that we ran our team. And I feel a lot better now, like realizing that the pressure that I was feeling was not necessarily pressure from our investors, but pressure from myself, and so it was something that I could control. And so that's something that I learned that I don't think I could have learned any other way.
Yeah, I love that aspect of control. I think for me, I've had those moments in my career where you kind of go through that personal journey, and you, instead of trying to look out externally, you're looking internally for how you can help yourself. So I love that story. Thanks. Does anyone else want to jump in, Lisa?
Yeah, I could jump in briefly. So I think I've been fortunate. I haven't ever really had any obstacles in my technical career that I think were due to being a woman. I think the biggest obstacles I faced are actually from my family and my family friends. So when I first started talking about going into tech, my family friends basically said, "What are you doing? Women can't be software developers." I'm not talking about like subtle hints. Literally, they told me women cannot be software developers. I had one conversation with a family friend, just like, you can't do that. My son does that. There was another time I got a job with the BBC in London. This was a big deal. Another family friend came up to me and, "That's a great job. Are you sure you can do it?" Like, that was a horrific thing to say. Like, thanks, that really helped my imposter syndrome. So you wonder why I didn't study software engineering at university. That was a lot of the culture that was around me. So one of the things that I would love to shift for more women coming up is just to try shift some of the culture around who can be a software developer and tell them, hey, actually, women can do it too.
That's great. I love the difference in the your family influence versus Rachel's. Definitely very different. Very, very different upbringing, and we all have our own family influences that have a real impact on what we choose to do with our careers. Okay, so does anyone else want to jump in on that answer?
Just very briefly, I would say I'm very happy to say actually that the subconscious bias that I have encountered has been really, mostly funny rather than limited in any way. For example, as a young manager, I would take my team out to lunch, and the team would be predominantly male, and I would get a super surprised look on a waiter's face when I would be the one picking up the check. So, here we go with the subconscious bias, but it's kind of a funny one.
That happens to me all the time to this day when I pick up the check with a group of men. So that still exists. Sonali?
Yeah, real quick as well. I think for me, the main obstacle is communication style difference. And so when you're just starting to become a programmer, I went through a phase where I was very fuzzy with how I communicated what I wanted to do, and I needed to be way more accurate and way more. And I found it quite pedantic for a long time, and till I realized that it's a large part of the culture, because for me, I was coming at it from very much an outsider culture. I was coming at it from design, right? So I found that like a real hurdle. It wasn't so much a gender thing, but then I might have attributed it a little bit to gender, but really it was more like getting over communication hurdles of how to ask for help and what to ask for help with, and learning, like trying to be fearless about that learning process. And especially when you're doing really well in one field, or you've like reached a certain level in one field, and then you're starting off from scratch with another one. You're just getting over those hurdles of like ego and communication, and trying like to desperately ask the right questions. And those I found. I'm happy to say now I'm like 4 years later in a very comfortable, quite a comfortable place. But those were some of the initial like extremely dramatic moments in my head.
Great, thanks, Sonali. So we've been through all of our own personal experiences, and collectively we've seen a lot. So if there are folks listening to this Hangout on air now, or maybe that are going to see it in the future, what advice or insights can you share with them in terms of how to break in, how to start off and even get interested or take that first step to get into either a career like yours or into technology in general?
Marina, you can go.
All right, thank you. So my advice is kind of twofold. First of all, just be open to opportunities and challenges, even if they seem daunting or scary. And also, especially as you're starting your career, try to make sure that you have a good manager and a mentor who truly cares about your professional development, your career development. From my personal experience, I never thought I would want to become a manager. I enjoyed being a hands-on engineer, and I was very happy doing that. But I was lucky to have a manager who thought something in me, who thought I could do it, and suggested I would take on a team as a manager. I was scared. I had never done it before. I had no idea if I was able to do it or not. But I had such good rapport and trust in my manager that I thought, you know what, if he thought I could do it, let me try it. And the rest is history. So I just encourage you to have somebody that you really have that relationship with, and just don't say no to opportunities.
My advice, if you wanted to start in tech, is to just start. I think now, like, the barrier to entry is much lower. You can take online classes. Like, one that I really like is 1 month Rails. And if you want to start, I would also recommend surrounding yourself with people that are similar to yourself, so like they want to achieve similar goals. One thing that helped me a lot is that I started to meet with people that were like 1 year ahead of me. So when I first started the company, I didn't know anyone that had started a company, so I just like went online and looked up people that were maybe 1 year ahead. They started a company a year ago, and just cold emailed them, asked them if I could get coffee. A lot of people won't respond, but a lot of people will. So don't be afraid to cold email people.
I love that piece of advice, Cindy, and I do that to this day, right? If I look at where Stride is now and where I want to be in a year or two, I reach out to folks and who I think are that one rung up on the ladder from where I currently am. And you're absolutely right. Enough people will say yes to a coffee if you're generally interested in learning from them, and it's been a huge value. So I love that advice. Thanks. Lisa?
Yeah, so just continuing on what Cindy said, really, a reminder that you don't need to have a software degree to get into tech. There are a lot of other entry points. There's a lot of boot camps in New York and all over the country. There are also organizations like RailsBridge, which Rachel's involved with, and ClosureBridge, which are weekend workshops over weekends. If you want to kind of dip your toe in to see whether you want to get into it, that's a great thing. And there's places like RC, which Sonali runs, where you can go meet some great people who can help mentor you and help you get into the system. I've been on a panel a couple of times at RailsBridge. It was brilliant. And what I've done after that is I say I'm available, just like Debbie, for coffee. So if you want advice to get into the industry, then seriously hit me up. I'm happy to give you my time for free to help get people in, because I really believe in it and helping that generation get in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in after that. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with both the pieces of advice above. Like, there's tons of resources online to start. Starting with projects you already love, like what brings you, why do you want to program, would be a good question to ask yourself, and then just going online and finding resources that will help you start your first piece of your first program that you ever write. And then trust me, when you write that, you get really excited. You're like, wow, this thing works. And finding that excitement is critical. And then keeping it going. It's not so much like, oh, I only want to program because I want to build a company. That's one avenue, but you could also program because you want to learn, or you want to educate yourself in this thing that basically controls everything we use today. So getting into a place where you're excited about what you're doing is critical. Yeah, so we run a program. We just, as of yesterday, launched this thing called RC Start, which is a free mentorship to people who just want to start programming. Otherwise, the retreat itself has people coming who already are programmers, like Lisa had come through. But RC Start is basically focusing on people who are brand new programmers who want to start learning how to program. And so that's an experiment that we're trying out ourselves, and I'd love to tell you all about it. So definitely reach out to any of us. We're here to help. It's a very, very exciting time, and most importantly, look at it as excitement rather than intimidation, because we can all get bogged down in fear and not do anything and get paralyzed. Rather, it would be great to look at it as an opportunity rather than anything that bogs you down. So just having that right mental energy, I think, is really critical. And of course, with that comes mentorship and leadership, and we're all around to help everyone out with that. So yeah, definitely.
And great, we're gonna open up to some questions from the audience in a minute, but I want to ask Rachel if you want to jump in with advice, or if you'd like us to move to Lucille opening up to questions.
I don't know that I have much to add to what the other women have already said, because it's everything that I probably would have said. Having dealt with a lot of beginners through the RailsBridge program, I think the most questions I get are about how do I go about finding a job. And a lot of times, I think you do have to show that you do know something, and then you also have to kind of find that mentor who's going to help you and really believe in you, and find some type of internship program. Or you can even do something like a freelance website, looking for resources that way. And definitely, when you're looking for a job, you have to kind of prove yourself and say that this is why you want me, this is where I'm going, this is what I've done, and how my experience maybe in a different field is going to bring that to this new job, and really sell yourself and learn about what you want to get out of it to bring that to the table. But otherwise, yeah, it's daunting for a lot of people. It's a change in your lifestyle, and finding that time, especially if you are a parent, if you have any type of financial difficulties, finding that time and really kind of asking yourself, how dedicated am I to learn this, and it's a lot easier, I think, than it used to be, but also it's possible, and it's about finding that support system around you to keep you going, and I think that's what's going to help you get to success.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the big takeaway that I heard from everyone's answer was there's no reason why anyone has to do this alone. Whether you're finding, like Irina and Rachel, a mentor, or Cindy had the great idea of reaching out to people that are one step ahead of you, or joining a culture and environment like or Recurse Center Start, there's many opportunities to really have a support network of people that have learned before you, that have some interesting insights, and I love that there was that common thread amongst everyone's answers. So thank you so much. And now, Lucille, if you have any questions from the audience that you'd like to throw to the team, we'd be happy to answer those.
Yeah, definitely. We have actually a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So one of the first questions that I like is, how can men in technology support women, and what does that support look like?
I'll jump in there. I think the best way men can support women are by, so I have an extremely supportive team. It's phenomenal. For example, I don't do any of the diversity outreach to get women and people and minorities in tech into RC. Both my co-founders do all this work. They spend a lot of time, a lot of hours. You don't look to the woman to do to do the diversity work. You do it from yourself, and you take on that energy and take on that effort and learn what it's like to actually put that effort into an area that you don't have any experience with, and I think putting in the hard work yourselves really does. I actually go out and help people get jobs, and I'm on the breadwinning side of the team here, and people don't know I'm one of the co-founders because they don't see me on the front end of the company, and it's a really exciting place to be, and they have particularly taken it on. It hasn't been like me going and asking them to do X. They chose to do X and asked me to step back from it because they would like me to do other work, and similarly with engineering. If you want female engineers, you ask them to be engineers. You don't hire all the women engineers and then expect them to do all the outreach. So I think everyone stepping in for all the roles is critical, including looking at your entire team equally and saying, hey, everybody needs to do diversity work, not just the women on the team, or not just the African Americans on the team, or not just the the Latinos on the team. So I think something like that's important. So that's how men can be very supportive towards the rest of diversity.
Go ahead, Rachel.
So for me, my advice is kind of, well, I'll use an example. So with Write Speak Code, we are aimed at women in development. But I think one of the biggest lessons from that, and also, I don't want to say complaints, but kind of like a good thing that I've heard, like good type of feedback that I've heard, is that women, like feminism is not just for white women. And with Write Speak Code, we've made a really concerted effort to understand the different parts of being a woman, which within being a woman we have both trans and cis women, and how do we solve the problem of making everyone feel comfortable there. And so me as a white woman going in, and I want to improve the diversity within our group of women, I look to see what type of issues are facing us, what type of things other women need. So we want to make sure that mothers could attend our conference. So we offered childcare as well as mothers' rooms. We wanted to support people with accessibility issues. So we offer translators, well, not necessarily translator, but like I think it's called CART. We had a stenographer here help somebody who was hard of hearing. So it's both deaf and hard of hearing. We've offered scholarships, so both people who might not be able to afford it, and that was both for LGBTQ women of color. So we try to offer these opportunities to get more diverse people in and really address what these problems are that would prevent them from being able to come to one of our events and try to solve it. So we're always looking to improve that, and I think that's also important for men who want to help and be a good ally, is to understand what type of problems. They might not completely ever feel like they've seen it, but just to listen to women, understand it, and try to get better at recognizing what those problems are. And I think that is like the biggest help, is empathy.
That's great. Anybody else want to jump in on that question? We've got a lot coming in, so we probably have time for like one or two more. New one that just came in. Once in technology, how do we get to the next step? How do you know what steps to take and skills to learn to be a senior developer or team lead, for example? There's a lot of support for newcomers, but not much guidance once inside. Who has advice on that?
You can go ahead.
I have two things to say on that. One, I just do want to reiterate the notion of, finding a mentor, finding, somebody that you can look up to, get advice from, and, somebody who you look up to already who is perhaps there where you want to be, in a couple of years. But also there's plenty of opportunities to take responsibilities where you are without getting that next title. There are initiatives, there are opportunities to improve the company where you are at already from, a technology perspective, from a cultural perspective, and as people start looking up to you for all the wonderful things that you've done, you're kind of going to be naturally considered for, the next more kind of official opportunity, to take a next step.
Anyone else want to jump in on that question?
I can go. I'm not a senior developer, nor have I ever worked on a team where we had like junior developers and senior developers, but when I'm looking for in our team, like when we're thinking about like who's going to get a promotion and things like that, is like who's taking initiative and who is, if you have a really good idea and you want to try it, like our team doesn't have to ask me. They can just do it, and if they need extra money, then they'll just like use it. And if you take that initiative, then that's the kind of person like that I, as a leader, am looking to promote.
Awesome. We have another question that, I kind of was hearing from Rachel, with Right Speak Code, what they're doing, providing the resources that, different types of people may need in order to engage in learning and taking this next step. So this question is, I find that women already in technology are there because they were drawn to it. The question is why more women are not in technology. Is it because they don't have as much capacity, or is there something about the environment that discourages women? Curious to see what you ladies think about that.
I can start on that one. I mean, there's some fairly significant study done around this. I don't think it has anything to do with the capacity or gender, brain structure, or anything like that. It really is environmentally structured. So there was a fantastic study done at CMU in 1996-98 timeframe, where people dropped out of CS from their first year of undergrad into the second year of undergrad, and it really boiled down to the type of undergrad environments that were being created in CS. And through these books and through these papers that have been written during that time frame, and this is particularly in the U.S. I mean, it's not a global thing, where the environment inside CS was so catered to young men who've like played with robots or played with little like games at home that allowed them to be a couple of steps ahead of the game. So environments that built around allowing people to put each other down, or as class assignments that involved only a very gender-biased class assignment style. So if you came in as a woman and hadn't played any of these games or didn't have an older brother, good luck feeling like you were in a safe environment. And there are some fantastic books around this. Unlocking the Clubhouse, Women in Computing is the book from CMU that really touches upon this, and I really encourage everyone to read it. It made a world of a difference with the way we run our program and how much we care about diversity, and including things like the types of projects people work on being genderless and inclusive. So it isn't a gendered issue. It's definitely an environment issue, in our minds at least.
Thank you, Sonali. So we're just about at time, so it's time to wrap. But thank you so much to our audience for asking such awesome questions. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your stories and sharing your authentic views and experiences with us. I personally learned so much today from each one of you, and I'm super inspired by all the stories that you've shared. So we hope you guys will join us again for the next Hangout. Stride is going to be hosting Hangouts every 2 months. So thank you so much for everyone joining.